In today's episode, we're going to be discussing the reality of sexual assault within the Jehovah's Witness organization. While it's always our goal to approach this topic with understanding, respect, it is one that can be triggering for some people. So discretion is advised.
Yeah, it's a tricky one here. We've been getting a lot of great voicemails, some funny, some our April Fool's one that was left for us, um, but some are very serious, like this one, and we kind of thought it deserved more than just playing it back, but maybe a whole episode about how the organization handles survivors of sexual assault.
When you think about mishandling of assault in relation to JWs in the last several years, it's mostly been related to CSA or having to do with minors. But there is unfortunately a large group of people who have gone through that experience as an adult and not been given the respect or the care or the support that they really needed to facilitate healing or justice in many cases. So we definitely wanted to take time to not only discuss it in current terms, but also see how it's been an ongoing theme.
Right, and it's more than, and as you know, it's more than just that they've mishandled things or haven't taken action that would be healing and helpful to survivors, but that they've actually done things that harm. And and we're going to demonstrate here how we've been taught this our whole lives from publications as old as the 70s. We have examples of how victims are blamed and how that damaging that is. And it goes all the way through from there, all the way up into the 80s and 90s, and into even recent publications, and all the way into the Shepherd the Flock of God book. It's everywhere, and it is so obvious now that we're stepped back away from it.
Agreed. And two, I think it's important to share the voicemail that our very, very brave viewer, Ericka, left with us because years ago, when my dad was questioning me about what my biggest complaint or my biggest issue was that would make me want to not be part of the organization anymore, I talked with him about the growing numbers of CSA cases that were coming forward. Now, to him, that was just a bunch of statistics. I was just hitting him with a bunch of numbers, a bunch of, court terminology and figures and things like that. But when you hear Ericka share her story, which she articulates so masterfully, even though it's such a raw and painful topic, I'm sure, to address, it's humanizing. It's not facts and figures. It's not notes from a court case. It's a real person with a real experience. And that's important. That's important for people that are on the outside to be heard that way. And I think it's important for people that are on the inside to understand that the things that pull them away from this organization may have nothing to do with doctrine.
Yeah, even though there's certainly plenty in there that could do it too.
Yes.
So shall we? All right.
Yeah.
Let's hear from Ericka. Here we go. Oh, and by the way, she left another message we've already put up as a voicemail, viewer voicemail episode. This is the second message she left. And the reason for the two messages is because we have a 5-minute time limit. That company, SpeakPipe, gives us a 5-minute time limit on there. So, but this is her second message, and it's just super important to hear it. So we'll share it now. But that's the reason she sounds like she's continuing because she just left a previous message.
I just wanted to give you kind of like the last straw of when I just said I was done with the JWs. When I was 21, I was sexually assaulted by a bouncer at a cocktail lounge where I wasn't supposed to be. I didn't want to be there, but circumstances had led me there, and he had set his sights on me even before I even walked through the door. And despite my protests of going, I don't like this guy, he's really giving me the creeps, like I really want to go, they were just like, no, he's fine. He's fine. Anyway, during the assault, I remember in my head just yelling for Jehovah's help, yelling for Jehovah to help me out of this. And like I kept fighting back and just wondering, just Jehovah, just help me. Please help me. Please help me. And when it was over and he had locked me in the storage room, I got out and I remember I went to go sit in this truck that this person that we were with, their truck, and he called the police. And I was sitting there with my sister, and the first words to come out of my mouth was, I am damaged goods. Like, nobody's gonna want me, and Jehovah hates me. Like, he just hates me. And when I had told my mom, she told me that we needed to go tell the elders. And so I had to go talk to the elders and tell them this horrible story in detail of what happened. And because I was intoxicated and I was at a place I shouldn't be, they privately reproved me because nobody knew about it. Well, when people started to know about it, they called me a slut. They called me easy. They told me that I deserved it because I wasn't spiritual enough. I wasn't a good JW. And people were told not to hang out with me. And it was just the people that I grew up thinking loved me, like my brothers and sisters. They weren't there for me. And I know people can say, oh, you were stumbled and things like that. But I didn't think like, oh, I was stumbled. I just thought, why would Jehovah make me go through that? Not giving me, a test beyond what I can bear. Why would he want to demean me like that? Why would he want to put me through that and make me feel so scared? Make me feel like I was never going to come out of that room? Why would he put me through that? And why would these people that I grew up with just turn on me? And the elders made me study because they said I was spiritually weak, and that's why it happened. And it's taken me so long to try and get over the fact that it wasn't my fault, that it was his fault, his doing, and no amount of being the best JW in the world, would have got me out of that. It was just a situation that I got into, and yeah. So after that, I just went, I'm done. And whatever self-confidence I had, I didn't have any after that. But yeah, it's still taking me a long time to get over that and to still try and get myself back to, feeling like it's not your fault. But anyway, thank you again for listening to my ramblings, and thanks again for all that you do, and take care of yourself, and I'll watch your next podcast. All right, thanks. Bye.
Is she incredible or what?
Yeah, I admire that she was willing to share such a, yeah. I mean, it sounds like she's other message. She said she's 45. Sounds like maybe she was 21, somewhere around that age. So it's a long time ago, but it's still, it'll beat you up.
Yeah, and just the fact that
Yeah,
she's willing to lay that all out in the hopes that it could maybe help even one more person.
it's awesome.
It's incredible.
Thanks, Ericka.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, yeah, that was a lot. And as I was listening, of course, you just You just feel so angry at, what she had to go through um, after the fact. I mean, not just the assault, but her horrendous treatment afterwards. Um, I'm sure there was things about that message that stood out to you.
Oh yeah, I
The
was making notes.
Yeah, I did too. The first thing was that when she did tell the elders, she said she had to recount in detail,
Oh wow.
what purpose. Elders are not police officers or investigators or any kind of law enforcement department. They are not certified counselors or therapists. What purpose could it serve for her to have to give explicit details of her assault?
To window washers. What
And
they
janitors.
they don't know what they're completely untrained. And well, we're armed with God's word and His Spirit because we're one true chosen. So whatever we think's best is what should be going on here. The arrogance.
Yeah, there's no need for her situation or anyone else. There's no need for you to have to share explicit details of this type of interaction with elders. She could have, if she had wanted to, she could have given the bare minimum statement: I was assaulted. I had an encounter against my will. And that should have been suffice. Either they believe her, don't believe her. Being so lewd with it for all these details, that's disgusting.
I was also struck by when she said, Jehovah hates me. Where would she have gotten that idea? And you can they obviously said to her that she said that she was reproved because not very many people knew about it. Well, that's absurd. You should have it. That means that the alternative, if more people had known, then she would have been disfellowshipped for being what? That is insane to be punishing somebody for that, and that's I don't know. That just seems criminal because that is just re-traumatizing, and good for her for working through going through the process of going, oh, it's not my fault. This wasn't my fault. It doesn't matter what you're wearing if you're inebriated or it's nobody else's fault except for the person who did the assault.
Of course. And what was my other note here? Oh, well, it made me think of how JWs often say that reproof, or especially disfellowshipping, it's not a punishment, it's a discipline, and there's a difference. It's how that's how the body disciplines in love. It's not a punishment. It's meant to, you know, strengthen you or, reaffirm you or whatever. So whatever you call it, how does surviving an assault, how does that garner discipline?
Yeah, it's absurd.
And then two, when she said the elders forced me to study. Now I'm sure obviously she wasn't, tied up at gunpoint, but she was obviously pressured, told, you need to really recommit yourself, refocus on your studies.
Double down on the indoctrination.
That's all it is. It's just re-indoctrination. Understand why you brought this on yourself and show that you're sorry for it. But it also just made me think that if they made her feel like her own assault was a consequence of a spiritual weakness, it's no wonder that so many people that leave the organization leave with a very bitter taste in their mouth about Christianity in general. That does not surprise me, not one little bit, because it's so awful that these things happen under that umbrella. we're God's chosen people. We represent him to the most accurate measure, and this is what we say is best. I wouldn't want to be part of that either. So that it's sickening, but also it doesn't surprise me.
I think the organization certainly does take it to crazy levels, and we're going to go to specific examples, publications where the organization has clearly teaching horrible things. However, and this is one thing that we're going to disagree on, I'm sure, out of the gate here. I was reading here, and I happened upon, I found this scripture here. It's in Deuteronomy 22, verses 28 and 29. And it says, if a man happens to meet a virgin, there's a couple things I have a problem with here, who is not pledged to be married and rapes her, and they are discovered, he shall pay her father 50 shekels of silver. He must marry the young woman, for he has violated her. He can never divorce her as long as he lives. There's a lot wrong with this. I'm not going to dwell on it long, but this is so horrific. And I think this is where a lot of religions like Jehovah's Witnesses, they run with stuff like this. And they get all the way to the field goal. It's crazy. First of all, there's this emphasis in the Bible that virginity is something in and of itself that is super important. You have less value if you've had sex and you're a young woman. It's never put that way on men. No. It's just on women. And then second, we have that this poor woman has to marry the person who raped her. He gets fined 50 shekels of silver. I don't know how much a shekel is, but he has to pay a fine, doesn't go to prison, doesn't get, it's just insane, the law here. And honestly, this is one of the reasons I find, I'm obviously where I am at my position here, my viewpoint, my worldview. I know there are certainly other ways to unpack this, and there are other scriptures that, value women. So that's nice too. But there are scriptures like this, and then organizations like Jehovah's Witnesses run with it and run so much farther than it started with. It just teaches women that, or young women in particular, that really the only thing they have of value is their quote purity. And then that to me rings real loud that, okay, some sexist ass, dumbass man wrote this. Again, our channel's not really about that. It's more about how the organization morphs all this stuff and then stacks, adds to the things written and makes it so much worse.
Yeah, she even said like her initial reaction before she was even able to, speak with police or anything like that. Her initial thought in the aftermath was, I'm ruined. I'm damaged. This is it. This is it for me. And of course, that's just such a heartbreaking thought, when you've just survived something so horrible.
Now I'm worthless. Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
To just think like the rest of your existence is just, going to be less because of what you experienced. So, but anyway, we're going to jump into a couple of places where the JWs show us in black and white how they approach situations like this, or what they're
yeah, you were telling me about this find, and I did not know about this. This is interesting.
This is, man.
Do share.
So if you're a millennial like Jason and I, and you grew up with the Young People Ask book, it probably looked maybe similar in size to this, but it was probably the hardback dark blue copy. That's the one from the 90s, and we studied that
here somewhere, but
I thought I did, but I couldn't find it. But we studied that in our like family study in like the 90s, that when I was a kid, and it was very cringy even back then, and nothing has changed. So but this is the rebirth, or like the second edition of Questions Young People Ask, Answers That Work. This is volume 1. So I flipped through it until I got to the section that has to do with how can I protect myself from sexual predators. So I'm going to be reading from pages 231 through 233, just a few lines from each page. Some of these statements are so ridiculous. It's like it almost took my breath away.
Mm-hmm.
So first, they, as in many other interviews with people in magazines and books, I have to ask myself, how many of these are real people? Because literally nothing could sound more scripted than some of these answers that are given as direct quotations. So I have to ask myself, like, is this a real person? Because I feel like it's not.
Oh yeah, I've bumped into those before. I think Lloyd Evans had an episode about that. There was like some kid who's quoted that I didn't even want to go to a birthday party because it's dumb, and I like going to. I can't remember what it was, but it was just this kid. It was like talking like a 55-year-old writer at Bethel would talk, and you're like, you're not. It was like 5 or 6 years old. This little boy. It's just like so. Anyway, my point being, the organization has really no problem just BSing their way through these experiences.
Yeah.
We interviewed blah blah. Shut up.
All
you
the
did not.
quotes from little kids supposedly on the blood issue. They're 8 years old on their deathbed in the hospital, and they're like, "I definitely don't want the blood.
Gotta hear
I definitely would rather choose death than take the blood, because that's what an 8-year-old would say." Okay. Anyway, okay. So they're interviewing this person, Annette, and they're taking the most extreme example of her assault and just applying it like in broad terms. So they're talking under the heading coping with guilt after assault. It says, Annette still struggles with the guilt over what occurred. Quote, I am my own worst enemy. I keep playing that night over and over again in my head. I feel as though I should have tried harder to fight him off. The fact is, after being stabbed, I was paralyzed with fear, and I couldn't do anything more, but I feel I should have. First, yes, I've never heard someone in casual conversation say, I feel as though. That's clearly the writing department. But anyway, like I said, they're taking the outlier or the more extreme circumstance, a stabbing, you were stabbed and then you were assaulted. Yeah. Okay. No one expected you to, be within your wits anyway. Ridiculous. So if you flip over to the next page, 232, just some of these statements that are so ridiculous, but also obvious. So the ridiculous one says, some people trivialize this issue using the excuse that boys will be boys, that victims of rape were asking for it. But no one deserves to be raped. Well, thanks for clearing that up.
What?
Yes. Captain Obvious. Wow.
But who in the last 80 years has ever said boys will be boys when people do?
It's just what they do. The old Y chromosome, it's just...
I think it's what they did in ancient Rome, maybe, but this is not a recent... Okay, I mean, hyperbole, obviously, but literally, culturally, in the last few decades, has anybody said that? I mean, unless the boys went to Yale, I think maybe a couple of those got that treatment when they were in court. But what are you talking about? No, that's never been an issue.
Yeah.
In recent history, like culturally.
Exactly. So the next paragraph, for a brief moment, I had a glimmer of hope, a glimmer that was quickly snuffed out. But for a second, I thought, okay, we're on the right track now. Those statements were terrible, but we're getting there. So in the next paragraph, towards the end of the paragraph, it says, some keep what happened to them bottled up inside and are racked with guilt and other negative emotions. However, who is best served by your silence, you or the abuser? You owe it to yourself to consider another option. Now, I read that statement and I was like, okay, Here we go. They're going to tell you, come forward, share your experience, protect, other
You
women
won't
or
be
men.
judged.
There's no judgment. We have if you're able, you have a duty, a moral duty to do what you can to, hopefully spare someone else from, falling victim to your same perpetrator. And this is where it's snuffed out. It does not say contact the authorities or call the anonymous hotline or
Shocked.
reach out to a counselor or a therapist. No, it doesn't say any of that.
Or does it even say, I mean, it probably says talk to the elders, but I can't imagine it says talk to the elders and you won't be judged. You'll just be listened to. They're just there to listen to you.
No.
Okay, I'll stop interrupting.
No, okay. So the next paragraph is under the heading Telling Your Story. So it starts out with a scripture from the book of Job, which says, I will give vent to concern about myself. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. Then it says, you will benefit from doing the same. Talking to a trusted confidant about what happened can help you come to terms with the rape and gain relief from your distressing emotions. This is the sentence. If, in fact, you are a Christian, it is important that you speak to a congregation elder about what happened. So your entire identity as a Christian, as a child of God, hinges on whether you discuss your assault with Bob the window washer, the elder.
The arrogance, the audacity.
Is this real life? I mean, I know I've said that on the show before, but sometimes it's not until you're...
That say that.
Yeah, is this real life? Sometimes it's not until like you've been on the outside and you look back and you're like, how is this a thing?
Right.
That everyone just goes along with. That there's no red flags when you read this type of stuff.
It's nuts that we didn't.
Man, we're lucky we got out when we did.
Yeah.
So the next sentence says, the comforting words of a loving shepherd can assure you that as the victim of rape, you have not been defiled by someone else's sin. That's what Annette found. She says, I talked to a close friend and she urged me to speak with the Christian elders in my congregation. I'm glad I did. They told me exactly what I needed to hear. What happened was not my fault. Now, of course, that is an important statement to hear.
Yes.
But I don't think that's exactly what you need to hear.
No.
Because
it's
that
certainly
was
not what Ericka heard.
That was the end of the discussion. It's not your fault. Period. The end. Goodbye. Dismissed.
I'm reminded of when the Shepherd the Flock of God book talks about this topic, how to help someone who has been sexually assaulted. And it says that sometimes you may have to meet with them more than once. Oh, you mean the going to need to talk about it more than once? And then it goes on to say, I'll put it up the page so people know I'm not making that shit up. But sorry, I get extra mad and I just start swearing. I'm not have to be. If you hear a bunch of silences and you're like, why is there silences? I'm not coughing. I'm just fucking cussing. But he in the Shepherd the Flock of God book, it also says that after 2 or 3 visits or something like that, that you may need to encourage them to maybe I think it was read their Bible and study and pray and make sure they understand that you don't have time to keep coming back. It was like limiting it to 2 or 3 times that you the window washer, Bob, are going to go help this victim of assault. We got to kind of rein it in. You got other people to help in the congregation.
Because you should be over it by then.
But still.
By visit number 3?
Oh, you should be fine. And if you aren't, you're kind of nuts. And you should still
study more.
They forget to ask for mental health. They literally forget to recommend getting a therapist. They don't say that at the end of all that. It's just amazing. They don't say anything about a therapist either in the Young People Ask book, do they?
No. So this section closes on page 234 and they outline the entire treatment plan. Are you ready?
Okay.
And I wish I was not reading this word for word, but this is what it says.
Hmm.
You too can find that, quote, there is a time to heal. Rely on supportive friends who are like the elders, described as a hiding place from the wind. Here it is. Take care of yourself physically and emotionally. Get needed rest. Rely on the God of comfort, who will soon bring about a new world where evildoers will be cut off. The end.
Oh, wow.
That's
So
it.
helpful. So helpful.
Get yourself a little spa day. Maybe do some cucumber slices to help deal with your assault. Rest.
It's about as useful. Oh.
And that's the long and the short of it.
It's amazing.
I
What year is that? Is that like a 2015 edition? What is that?
This
When did that one come out?
is 2011.
2011. Okay. So
The
it's-
original
it's-
one was 1989.
Yeah, I remember
And
being
then-
at the convention, and my older brother and sister went and they had all the teenagers go sit in one section on the floor of the convention when they did the
Yes.
release talk. So there was just a sea of kids down there. And I was, I guess, 89. I was
Which
9
is
years
weird,
old, so I was a
too.
little too young. So I stayed up with my parents. But it's a very strange thing to do. I remember them segregating the audience like that. Anyway, doesn't matter. But yeah, that I think many of the changes, you'd expect a lot of improvements into the new edition. But I think most of what they did with the new edition was just get rid of the 1980s pictures and replace them with more modern pictures.
Yeah. So yeah, their like care plan, it doesn't give any actual rubber meets the road options for what you should do afterwards. And I'm not saying that talking to someone from your church of choice is a bad idea, but it does not replace talking to a professional, qualified, experienced, trained, educated therapist, grief counselor, trauma coach, law enforcement officer, investigator, any of that.
Right.
You can't sub any of that for an elder. No matter how sincere their intentions are, they are not qualified.
Right. And it's such a good point that if they're not qualified, then they can actually cause damage. And in this situation, these elders had no idea, I'm sure, that the damage they were causing Ericka, they were just thinking, well, how'd she get there? Why was she out? Was she drinking? Oh, and then completely missed that they are reinforcing the damage. Oh, this is my fault. Because that's what everybody thinks when something bad like that happens to them. It's kind of a natural reaction in your brain, even though it's not healthy and it's hurtful. It's insane. But we see where we've gotten these ideas, like with the Young People Ask book, but it goes back so much farther than that. We were talking about this before we started here. I'm going to reach over and grab I just noticed that my camera follows me, I guess. And that was kind of creepy.
You're
I start
fancy.
moving. Yeah, I don't know why it's never done that before. Some setting must have changed. Anyway, I think
It's
I
a
might have a
ghost.
ghost. It's a ghost, yes. But here it is, my book of Bible stories. Wow. We did an episode a long time ago on this, but
We did.
oh my goodness. This is story number 20. Lay over the guy's voice.
Story number 20. Dinah gets into trouble.
Anybody triggered by that? Oof. Now, I thought these stories were like 15 minutes long, but it turned out I was just 5, so everything seemed like it was 15. These are literally like 2 minutes long. But do you want me to play it, or do you want me to we can just talk about it?
We can. It doesn't matter.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll just talk about it. I bet everybody's going to tune out if we hear that voice. But there's so much wrong with this little story. What stood out to you?
Well, from a visual standpoint, this is one of my favorite stories when I was a little girl because I was like, "Oh, I love their pretty clothes. All these Canaanite women, like they're so pretty."
Well, no wonder they wanted to date them.
One of my
They were
favorites.
cuties. Let's
Yeah.
go out there and date the Canaanites. They got all the good products.
Um, so yeah, many things. The way that it's written, um, before you even understand like the background of Dinah and her family came to live in the land of Canaan and all that, um, already they set it up like the choices she's making are displeasing. Um, it says, we can be sure that Jacob would not be pleased that his daughter is making friends with these Canaanite girls. Um, so already she's just setting herself up for failure just by being friends with these other women, already on the bad path. So what follows next? Fate, destiny. Where else could it go?
It's gonna go bad if you associate with these Canaanite people.
Mm-hmm.
And I notice also in the second paragraph, did Abraham want his son Isaac to marry a girl from Canaan? No, he did not. Did Isaac and Rebekah want their son Jacob to marry a Canaanite girl, and so on? And I remember being a kid and hearing these, and you absolutely immediately equated Canaanites with worldly people. So we can't be friends with anybody at school. Those people are baddies. It's an us and them, and that's a classic cult trope. You see political cults do it. You see, Mormons. You see Scientologists, like you were talking about the other day. They're bad. We're good, and that went in my head as a kid. And you don't trust worldly people.
Yeah. Proceed.
Sorry.
You're fine.
But then Dinah goes and Shechem sexually assaults her, and then the reaction of her brothers. One guy raped our sister. Let's run over to their village and murder every man we find. What a bunch of psychos. And that in the commentary from the organization, from the governing body's writing department, in the commentary, at no point does it condemn them for that act. Like, what the hell? Like, that's not a bad thing to do?
The one sentence. Jacob was angry because his sons did this bad thing. The end.
Oh, okay. I guess it does say that. Okay.
One sentence. That's all you get.
Okay, you're right. All right. Maybe I went a little overboard there. Okay, guys, I admit I'm wrong. But
it's minimized.
It's minimized.
And
how did all this trouble get started?
That's the clincher.
Mm-hmm.
The story starts with a sexual assault. Friends that were not approved of. A sexual assault. Massive bloodshed. Who is responsible for all this? Who lit the fuse to this powder keg of events? How did it all get started? Dinah. Look at the trouble that she caused. As I've said before, I'm not a psychologist, but I know victim blaming when I see it. Amen. Or when I read it from a children's book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that thinking, that victim blaming carries over from 1976 or 78 all the way into the 2000s, because this statement from Natalie basically says the same thing. It says, Natalie struggles with guilt. I shouldn't have been trusting. My parents had the rule that my sister and I had to stay together when we played outside, but I didn't listen. And so I feel I gave my neighbor the opportunity to hurt me.
Wow.
I struggle with that the most. What? So again, she didn't listen. Just like Dinah. She didn't listen. Although it clearly says she was playing outside with her sister. So she was, I'm sure, a child. She didn't listen. Imagine that. A child didn't listen. And look where it led. Unreal.
It's so strange.
It's unreal. And then, too, the fact that they, whether it's a assault with adults or minors, it's always seen or addressed first as a sin and not a crime.
All right.
even if you're a believer, why can't it be both?
Right. I noticed it sounded like on Ericka's voice message that the person who called, because it was this guy that they were with. She didn't say it was a brother. There was some guy that they were with. She waited in his truck, and he contacted the police. So it's the worldly guy, I believe. It strongly gives me that impression. I correct me if I'm wrong, Ericka, in the comments there, but it seems like the one worldly person took the right action.
Yeah. The normal response
Let's call
was
the police.
taken by the non-JW.
You stay in a safe spot. I will call the police.
Yeah.
He's the good Samaritan. It's amazing.
And then to part of the aftermath that she described, she said that she was marked, basically. She was marked within the congregation, which, if you don't know what marking is, it's basically like, it's an understanding that you are not good association or you should be avoided without any kind of formal announcement. It's kind of like unspoken understanding amongst families within the congregation.
It's a soft shun. You can't do any fun things with them. You can't do anything nice for recreation. You can only go to spiritual activities, they say it, with them.
Yeah, group stuff. So, at the time in her life when she was most vulnerable, she was most wounded in heart and spirit, physically, whatever. When she needed that love and support the absolute most is when people were sticking their nose up in the air and saying, no, you brought it on yourself. Your choices led you here. Stay away. I don't want you hanging out with my kids or with me. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable. But then they have the nerve to call themselves God's one true chosen people. The only ones.
These are the people that are making optimal decisions. These are the people that have the wisdom from above. It's insane. And I can't imagine if you told a therapist or a teacher or anybody, I mean, maybe she sounded like she was college age, some teacher, but if you told anybody with authority over a younger person what the elder's reaction was to punish her for that, I mean, I think you could culturally go back decades and decades and people would be like, you did what now?
Yeah, come again?
Oh, okay. It's just absolutely nuts, the way they treated her. And I guess our point of this episode is it's shocking and surprising, but then when you look back at what they've been teaching us from infancy, it is exactly their playbook.
Yeah, decades worth of proof.
From the My Book of Bible Stories all the way up to the Shepherd, the Flock of God book.
Yeah. So our advice as non-qualified therapists is, just as former JWs, don't rely on the elders. If you are an assault survivor, don't rely on the people that are more concerned with bringing reproach on the organization than with your personal safety and well-being.
Grew up in shadows, now I'm free. Dysfunction behind me, hope inside. New family found, safe and sound. Past was dark, but I'm not bound. Future is bright. We're taking flight from shadows to sunlight. Everything's alright.